Dr. Phil talks prepping. Let's discuss. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching us. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another Coffee Rant with Dano. Tonight we are discussing a show. A lot of people had sent me emails on a segment that Dr. Phil himself talking about prepping, and I gotta say, I was pretty intrigued. I'm not a huge fan of Dr. Phil, I'll just say that right away, but, covering a subject that's relevant to the channel and millions of people around the world, there's a couple things we're going to discuss of what I saw and what people should probably be paying attention to. So there were a couple people. The segment starts off with a guy who's been prepping for years. He preps food, ammunition, way of life, right? And then we have another guy who's more of like kind of a scientist of it all, like does calculations, things that are going to happen if it all hits the fan someday, right? He starts talking about EMP, he talks about nuclear blasts, he talks about in general, climate change, things that are happening all around the world and why it's smart. Well, he doesn't really talk about why it's smart to be prepared, but you kind of hear that all throughout, and they kind of go through different segments. And there's another guy who's lived with preppers for years, who was living in an apartment, and now he lives on a 5-acre land piece of property. And I gotta say, it's something we all need to be paying attention to, guys, because one thing that stuck in my head throughout the entire conversation is that if something bad happens, most likely nobody's going to save you. I mean, it's, and I've always believed this. It's like if something ever happens, don't expect, your government or your, and I would say maybe even family and friends to come to your rescue. This is something that I don't think a lot of people talk too much about, but it was interesting seeing it from a TV show perspective, okay, because that says something, right? And the one thing that kind of sticks with me that this says something is this information has made it to Dr. Phil, arguably a well-known talk show host, okay, and it's getting out there. It's getting out there, and they talk about different places around the world where communities actually plan for these things, where they're building bunkers. They're doing things like in case something ever happens. Hopefully it never does. But it's good to be prepared nonetheless. That's, and it's, to where we don't talk about, prepping as much, on this channel as, in a wide variety, because we talk about ways to save money in the grocery stores, but we always talk about food, right? We always talk about making sure that you are prepared because of prices. Well, there are other things that we need to think about in the future, and not just being prepared for the prices, but in the case of any of these events ever happen, we're well prepared. And there were some key points that I took away from this video. By the way, you can look this video up. I literally, I don't click on links on my emails. Thank you for everyone who sent them to me. I will literally go on YouTube and look it up. You can't trust links, and stuff like that. But I know some of our longtime viewers and everything. I don't know. That's just the thing. I don't know. I don't trust clicking on links from different emails. You just never know these days. But I will say I looked it up on YouTube, and I literally just went to YouTube search page and put Dr. Phil prepping, okay, and it just all kinds of different videos on this one show that they had, and we have a lot to talk about in this, because a lot of it I found very interesting. Like they talked about things that we've talked about on this channel before, like if it all hits the fan at some point, everybody's going to be running to the woods. It's going to be hard to get food because everybody's going to be hunting deer. Everybody's going to be fishing. Everybody's going to be doing these things. And I think in some ways, I'm kind of glad that this happened, that it's talked to on such a huge TV network of Dr. Phil here. And they actually do a poll, which we'll get into later, which I thought was kind of interesting, with a small group of people in the audience that did this poll. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. I just thought that it's interesting to get these points out across. And one of the key points, like I was saying, that kind of stuck with me is community prepping. I think prepping kind of gets a bad name because there are so many different kinds of people out there, and that's okay. There's diversity in everything. You know, there's doomsday preppers. There's people who just want to have a little bit of a stockpile in case something happens. Maybe you or one of your family members gets sick, right? Or you know, if you live in an area that traditionally has like hurricanes or heavy tornadoes or stuff like that. You know, these are the people that we who don't have these kind of things around us should probably be talking to, because they know how to do it. They have an overstock. They have stocked up on water and foods and stuff because they have to, right? It's like if we all thought like we have to, the one thing and one of the biggest key points that I took out of this Dr. Phil show was community prepping. Community, like thinking as a community, like, okay, if we all did this, if we all stocked up on, you know, different foods and stuff, if we all kind of, you know, we could go back to trade eventually, right? I know we've had people on the channel who are preppers that talk about, you know, barter, that don't even drink coffee, that talk about bartering coffee, that, you know, if something ever happens, well, then you have coffee. Coffee's a popular item. Very popular item, especially in this household. Now, as to where, you know, it's one of the things that I've stocked up on. I like to have some overstock of things to make sure that, you know, in case something ever does happen, like, I've always thought, like, if something happens in the family or something, that I'm well prepared. But the more and more itchy, trigger finger happy that different places and countries and, you know, all these different things that could happen, not saying they will, okay? But thinking of all these things, you know, it's like, why not prepare a little bit? Why not make sure that you are at least able to take care of your family? And if we can go beyond that, I was kind of surprised they didn't elaborate on that a little more, because I think that would be number one. You know, if you have the means to stock up for yourself, well, think of your, most of you have kids, probably think more than others, right? But I mean, I think of my wife, I think of my family, I think of my friends, you know, it's like, and to be honest, a lot of my friends and family are like this. They think the same way, you know, and I'm sure a lot of them watch the channel here that are always thinking, well, you know, I'm saving money now for the future, but it is a little more than that. It is a little more than that when we really dig deep. And now we're seeing this on a national show, okay, that is big. So it is getting to a national audience. Okay, this is something, this could be an opportunity for people, hopefully watching this at home, to check out, you know, some different things. Now, we'll go into this poll here that they did, because I thought this was kind of interesting too. I don't know how many people were in the audience. Maybe 50, maybe 60, maybe 100. I don't know. It's not that many people. But they did a poll on which would you do after watching the show. They had this at the end of the show. What would you do to prepare yourself a little more in the future? Would you buy more food? Will you plan on stocking up on more food to make sure that you have food in the future in case something to get you through, right? At least until you can figure out what you have to do, right? And then the next one was weapons, which I was kind of, you know, I wasn't surprised. Okay, a lot of people were afraid of weapons and stuff like that, you know, ammunition, things like that. It was but still was at 10% of the audience. Now the food was at 49%. I figured that was going to be the highest. Okay, and number 3 was building bunkers. That was a very small percent. Actually, I think that was like 10%. I think the ammo thing was a little higher. I am paraphrasing throughout this. I wanted to talk about this. I read a couple articles on what they had done. It's getting a lot of ground here. Okay, a lot of people were talking about this, so I had to make a video out of this. I was going to do something else today, but I was like, you know, we need to talk about this a little bit because I do find it's very interesting. And the last one was do nothing. Okay, the last one out of the 4 things that the audience could vote for was do nothing. That was 39%. Now, I was a little surprised that wasn't the biggest one. The biggest one was the 49%, it was the highest percentage, was people invest in more food for the future. Okay, now 39%. I'm not surprised to see the second highest one, which I thought was going to be the highest, do nothing, right? Because I'm sure most people just go through the day and think, well, we'll just figure it out as we go. Well, honestly, maybe those people who think that way should probably watch this show. And the only reason why I'm really directing people to watch this show is because as to where maybe a handful of people might listen to me and maybe some other people on different channels, we've been showing things. We've been showing the food crisis. We've been showing prices go up. We know that at the tip of a hat, things can disappear, right? I never encourage panic buying or anything, and this is in by no way, shape, or form a panic video, okay? Now, when you go and you watch the show by Dr. Phil and you watch some of these different people who've been through it and talking about it and stuff, it's eye-opening in a way that it's coming basically from a very well-known TV show, okay? Most people know who Dr. Phil is. Only about 45,000, maybe a few more, know who Dano is. However, I feel it's important to talk about these things every now and then. I don't like talking all the time about these kind of things because, we want to make sure as to where we are a family-friendly channel. This has a lot to do with family, okay? Now, your kids and stuff, yeah, this video right here may not be for them, as to where we do try to provide, a lot of different entertainment and things for everybody out there. But this is something that as families, we should grow into this together, right? If I was a dad, I would be teaching my kids all the skills that I have to teach them. Fishing, hunting, anything. Right. And I'm not much of a hunter. I have before, right? But I'm not one that goes out hunting. I've just never really been me. But I have a lot of friends who are trained in that. And it's good to know. It's good to have friends that basically, are part of these things where it's like, I know the couple people that I would call. And me and some friends have talked about these things, and it's not really something I really talk too much on the channel because, for one, I don't really know how to talk about them. I'll be honest. I don't really know how to discuss these things. The only things that I know is what I am and what I can discuss that we do in our lives, right? That's really the gist of what I can do. I've always known that it's good to have a little bit extra food in case something happens. Now, years ago, I never would have thought of something like, Cold War tactics or thinking, of an electromagnetic pulse or something that could take our grid down, and you have to, basically hope that you have things, because if that happens, well, yeah. It was another interesting thing that one guy had mentioned in this is that everybody, they were talking about, like doomsday. I assume they didn't say this, but I guess like doomsday preppers and stuff. There's a sense of life will go on, okay? Otherwise, what are you preparing for, right? So people who have been doing this for years have to have in their head that life will go on, and that the things that people are stocking up on, whatever it is, however you are, this is to give you that little bit of comfort in knowing that, okay, if something happens, well, I have a little bit of time to think it out while the masses, race to the woods and do what they can to try and survive. And, it's something that I know it's crazy to think about. And the fact that this was on a Dr. Phil TV show got me thinking really quick. This is getting out there. I think it's a great thing. Some people would probably say, well, it's probably not a good thing that this is getting so much attention. I don't know why, because like some other countries that they talk about who've been doing this since like 1963, like through the Cold War, I mean, you never know what can happen. And the not knowing is the knowing that I need to make sure that I'm prepared a little bit so I can figure out a plan if something does happen. Good if you can figure out a plan before all that, but just want to make sure and the reason why I'm really talking about this now because I know when you watch that Dr. Phil show, it's going to make you think. It's going to make you think a little bit. You sit here listen to me babble on about things till your eyes close, right? And then you may be dozing off right now. I don't know, but if you check that out, okay, it's like it's a familiarity that has been around for years and years. I'm assuming that a lot of our viewers watch Dr. Phil or have at some point in the past. And whether you trust the shows, whether you believe them, whether or not, you can look into some of the research of some of the people that are on his show, and you can find a lot of truth in that. And I'm not saying that everything they're talking about is true or false. I'm just saying numbers don't lie. When you do your own research and you look down the path of things, you can really find, like we've talked about before, a grain of truth. Okay, whether something seems too so far out there that it can't be true, well, do your research and come up with your own determination of that, right? Because you can't lie to yourself and you can believe in yourself and it doesn't matter what anybody else says. It's like some people hear things and they let that sway your decision or things. And that's happened to me in the past. And it's like, that's why me personally, when it comes to anything that's going on with things that we talk about on the channel that are of a serious nature, like food prices, people being able to afford food, yeah, we take that very seriously. And when we talk about things like food recalls and stuff, so I've kind of backed off a lot of different, going over the specific points of some different food recalls because these things constantly grow, and I do a rigorous amount of research before we even talk about these things. Now, I've watched through this video twice of the Dr. Phil show just to make sure that just to make sure that I believed everything they were saying, or whether I believe it or not. I was looking into some of the different people who were talking on this show. There's a guy who came out with a book where he talks about living with preppers for like a few different years and how it has swayed his decision to literally change his lifestyle and move from an apartment to a 5-acre farmland, 5-acre piece of land. And, and I'm not saying that everybody should go out there and start building bunkers and all this other stuff, but I feel like the clock, I feel like the gears are turning, right? This show that I watched, I've already known this stuff. I've already thought of this stuff, but I feel like for the massive audience, right? They're going to go home from this show after being there, or people watching this, and you can't help but think. You can't help but think about it now, right? It's going to be in your brain after you watch this, right? And these are things that a lot of people probably on our channel here already know. But I mean, a lot of it is it's getting people who don't know or maybe have had it in the back of their head. It doesn't take a mathematician to go into a grocery store, any store, and realize, wow, I need to start figuring some stuff out, right? Like meal planning. I wonder how many people out there have changed their eating habits because of food prices. I'm sure a lot of us have, us included, right? Now, we're always trying to mix and create different meals, save a little bit of money within meals, but, we also look at it for what it is. Some places you can literally go to a restaurant and it would be cheaper to eat that meal than it would be at home. However, that's not teaching you anything other than being able to go out and get it and not have to cook it yourself. I have to say, it's nice to do that sometimes. But at the same time, these things are what are constantly building up. We look at things like egg prices that have just doubled. Some people were talking on the channel, left in comments that eggs are even way higher at some of your places, which, I mean, they could be going up right now as we're talking. Most of you got it the other day when we were talking about the Folgers coffee that went up like $1.50, $1.50 over the last week or two. And it's only going to get higher, guys. It's only going to keep getting expensive. One thing that one of the guys said in that show, the first guy who he was talking to, he's a prepper, and he was saying that the best time to prep was yesterday, but the second best time is today. And I will say that as well. It's never too late. I mean, yeah, you're not going to get things for what prices were yesterday. That is a given. But we can pay attention to some of the different sales. Something we always talk about, like if we only shop the sales at the stores. I know I sound like a broken record to most of you, but that's really what it is. It's the only way we're going to save on things from yesterday and save a little bit toward tomorrow. Now, that little bit of money that you're able to save, because everything's going up in price, right? We always talk housing, cars, everything. Me and Jessica are getting to the point where we are going to have to get a house. I know people are going to say, just wait. We've been waiting for years. And it's like, we are out of space. I want to have more stuff. I want to have more things in place, right? They even talk about this too. A lot of our, and I guess that's why I enjoyed this video so much, because a lot of our viewers have talked about a lot of these things on the channel. Some things I won't talk about because, I just don't. Some stuff I don't want it to sound too, scary, right? I don't. It's keeping the whole other side of things out of it. But it's like as we go on, the more and more I realize, well, it's a lot more that I can do if I have my own piece of property. And I know we're going to overpay. It's just going to be what it is. And, we just have to do, and another thing I was getting at, I completely lost my train of thought there. People were saying that, keep what you have quiet. Okay? Keep what you have quiet. Well, kind of hard for me to do because I'm all over the internet here. So the best thing that I can hope for is that community prepping does become a thing. We need more community gardens in this country. We do. We do. And there are some. And I think if there's anything we can take away from this, the community prepping is something that we need to do. It's something we need to focus on. That is the biggest thing, is that if we look at this like a community, well, if something happens, well, then we're ready. We're already thinking, okay, as ready as we can be, but we know that, this guy has this gal has this, everybody has their different things. And we all think as a community. And hopefully, I know everybody won't be this way. If it ever came down to a third of people being this way, I would consider that a serious win, because it's never going to be half. Out of the 340 million people that live in the United States, I would be very shocked if it was half. Awesome if it was, but more and more people are talking about this, and the more we see these kind of things on shows like Dr. Phil, the more and more people are, like I said, people are going to talk about this. It's going to get out there. There's, the couple things that we got out of this, community prepping or community preparing or community, hey, let's have other things here in case something happens, right? I don't know what it is. I know that when I hear negative energy about preppers, it's always, oh, they're preppers. They think the world's going to end. No. Sounds like they think the world's going to go on because they're trying to prepare themselves a little bit to be ready in case something does happen. Because again, if you thought the world was going to end, what's the reason to prepare to begin with, right? It's just check that video out. There's a few different segments on it on YouTube. You can search it, Dr. Phil prepping. That's all. I don't put links in the videos unless it's links to my own videos. And I don't know, you may want to watch a different one from what I watched. I watched a couple different ones, but it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. You can break it down to where, obviously there's no commercials or anything like that. You just kind of go through it. Except for whoever put the video on there. They'll have ads, and good for them. That's how they make their money. That's how I make my money. Guys, I'll tell you what, it was very interesting. Very interesting to see from a national perspective on this. I thought it was very interesting. The people who he had on the show sounded like they knew what they were talking about. Again, one guy who's been kind of living the life wrote a book, and he's very, very, very into what's going on. And then this other guy who was kind of I like people who break down numbers. I like people who break down things in the way that this isn't, scientifically or mathematically, this is what's going to happen. Okay, if this happens, this is going to happen. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is the way that things happen. Now, minus some things of people coming to save you, which none of them agree with, and I agree with that too. Don't expect that anybody's going to come help you if there is a world event, and I think a certain thing that happened a few years ago has proved that to everyone. I think a lot of people. Oh, and this guy at the very beginning, he had started prepping back right after 9/11. He had started stocking up on things because I guess that was a wake-up call for him. And I think what happened back in 2020 was a wake-up call for a lot of people. And now we're seeing the after effects, and we're seeing things that are happening in stores and people who just can't afford to even drive because insurance and all these other things are getting so expensive. There's a lot of people, we've gotten a lot of comments from some of our older videos that are talking about what happened in June with a lot of different cars. My car insurance, like I said before, went up $600 a year back in January. Now we got the 6-month thing where people who weren't, who didn't know about it, everybody who was saying, oh, well, no, mine's fine. Well, now it's June, and we're hearing back from some of those people who are saying that their insurance has gone up as well. And I hate that. But it's like, that's the difference. There's like a 6-month gap thing, whether you maybe years ago you got your insurance in June or it was good through January. Either one, that seems to be the 6-month factor in, right? Because if you get insurance like in August or something, well, then it was prorated, right? Maybe until January or until June. So I don't know. Interesting video though. Interesting show with Dr. Phil. Thank you all. I must 30 or 40 of you guys sent me links to that in my email, and I do appreciate it. It was interesting. It was interesting, and I think in the future, it's it's where it's not something I talk about all the time. It's where me and Jessica do a lot of different videos on this channel. I thought this was very relevant. I thought we needed to chat about this for a minute. Wanted to just go over some of these things. It's something we do need to, at least have in the back of your head of some of the possibilities. I think when you talk in terms, of a nuclear blast or nuclear holocaust or an EMP, I think that kind of just tunes a lot of people's brains out. Like, well, if that happens, who cares anyway? The way I look at it, and the way I've looked at it for years, even before everything that's happened over the last few years, like I said before, what if you get sick? What if something happens? What if you have to have a major surgery or something and you're down for a while? Which I'm sure many of you have stories of that. Feel free to let us know down in the comments some of your stories. That maybe you were glad that you had prepared a little bit for the future. Or maybe you didn't, and maybe that was something that had caught your eye. Maybe that was your wake-up call. Maybe that was your wake-up call. I don't know. We just have to keep moving forward, keep our heads on a swivel, make sure we are paying attention to everything, guys, as to where, I know this is very relevant to the channel. Very relevant to the channel, and I know I'll have mixed feelings on this video, I know, but it's something we definitely had to talk about. It's something that people should pay attention to. And again, the thing, also, you want to prepare for your family, make sure you're thinking about your friends, because somebody gets sick, something happens, if you're in Hurricane Alley or Tornado Alley, if you have any friends that we have friends and family that live down in Florida. I have learned a lot from some of our family that live down in Florida. A lot. Things that just come second nature. Like, hey, it's hurricane season, time to load the garage up with water. You know what I mean? Or hey, I live in Oklahoma, we get tornadoes, a tornado could pop up any second, And it's like, when you think like these, when you think like this, well, maybe extend that out a little bit and think, well, I need to prepare for any kind of situation. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.